Yes,
you know?
that's the objective.
Yeah. And you can't really fly, can you? I mean, it's not like it's convenient to,
I've tried 3 or 4 different ways. You fly to Atlanta and there's connection. You can drive up to Tampa and take Airways. It's really never been great, and
No.
it's just as long.
yeah.
Unless you have your own plane, you pull out of Page Field and you go to Tallahassee. Other than that, no, I don't know anyone. A few people did. Sid Kitchen actually flew up. So from Babcock Ranch, they have a plane. So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, he was only there for a couple hours.
Another minute to go.
Commissioner Ruin, that's Ann Brady, if you haven't met her officially. She's the,
Met and sure.
Yeah.
you know her. Okay, great. The director of the fellowship program at the Rauschenberg Foundation.
How's that project coming? Ann, are you on schedule?
Well, we've never been on schedule, actually. And now the hurricane put us,
Oh, yeah.
we're supposed to reopen in February right now. So that put us off probably 9 months, set us back.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, all the buildings were damaged. None, they're all fixable, but we had just renovated some of them and then they got trashed.
Oh, God, what a shame.
Yeah. And then mold remediation.
You're still planning the real natural looking landscape, allowing the tides to rise over the property, et cetera. And
yeah. And the Weeks Field, which is where the helicopter pad was, and that area actually really did the best because that had been returned to meadow and all salt tolerant plants and vegetation and allowing the water to come up. It's only a foot above sea level. That will come back without us doing anything to it.
right.
So it really is a testament to what can happen if you can allow that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
Okay, well, let's we're a little after 9 o'clock. I guess we should get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 14th meeting of the Captiva Community Panel. Before we start working on agenda items, I want to remind the audience that as we move from topic to topic, we always pause to take public comment. So simply raise your hand with the chat function or type a question, and your question will be recognized before we move on to the next agenda item. Begin with a roll call to see who's present. David Mintz.
I am present, thank you.
Okay. Marguerite Ty Maville. Marguerite, are you here? Well, maybe hopefully she'll join us later. We saw Ann Brady. John Jensen.
Here, Jay.
Thank you, John. Sandy Stillwell. Hopefully she will be arriving soon. I got a call from Bruce McDonald yesterday. He has to travel to a board meeting today. He thinks he might, hopefully can call in around 10:30. Linda Laird. We must be starting too early. I know these people. Bob Walter. Jesus, we even gonna have a quorum. Tony Lappy.
I'm here. Unfortunately, I don't know why my camera's not working, so maybe I didn't shave or something. I don't know, but I'm here.
Did you did you click the video button down at the bottom of the screen, Tony?
I did all that stuff. It's just something's my wife's computer, so I'm not responsible.
Okay. Then lastly, Ken Gill.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Well, hopefully those others will be joining us soon after we get started.
Bob Walter just joined us.
Okay, Bob Walter is in. Thanks, Bob.
Morning.
Hi, Bob.
Morning, Bob.
Well,
Sandy Stillwell just joined us.
And Sandy did also.
Good morning, sorry.
That's okay. I should probably wait a couple of minutes after 9 before I call the roll. Okay, first order of business is review and approval of minutes from the last meeting. I read over the minutes. There's a lot discussed at the last meeting. I think it was a really good meeting. I particularly liked our chief engineer from the state working on what the causeway plans were going to be. And as you'll all recall, she volunteered to come back at our March meeting to give us a further update. So a lot of highlights in those minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
A second?
Sandy?
Is there any discussion? Otherwise, everybody in favor of approving?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you all. Okay, first order of business is we have our Commissioner Kevin Ruane to lead us off with the meeting today. Kevin, we know how busy you are, and we really appreciate you kicking off our meetings with a quick update on, what's going on from the county perspective. So the floor is yours, and take however you want to discuss whatever you would like us to know.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it. So a couple things just obviously that would be really appropriate to share. Last Monday, county commissioners met and came up with the new plans for the Sandoval Causeway. There's a lot of resiliency issues that we have put into that, a variety of different issues from sheet piling to riffraff to you name it. As one could imagine, the cost went from about 143 million. After resiliency is about $288 million. What the county wasn't prepared for was there's a 20% local match. So that requires the county to put up about $56 million for the bridge.
Oh, wow.
And they continued with that theme with the Pine Island Bridge, as well as the two little bridges going into Fort Myers. So it's about $72 million in local match, which obviously would be very financially painful. So with that in mind, I was in Tallahassee last week and talked about three main topics, if you will. One, obviously, to have both Senate and House find ways to pay for the $72 million in appropriations. Seemed to go over well. Had the opportunity to certainly meet with not only the approach chair on the House side, met with the resiliency chair, both on the House and the Senate side. So it went over well. Second topic was utilities, and utilities cover a gamut of water, wastewater, coupled in with natural resources. Our asks were pretty significant in both. About $120 million in natural resources, which is septic to sewer conversions, many different grants that we need to see go through, as well as utility issues that we had. So above and beyond, my asks last week were probably in the neighborhood of about $440 million. The good news is that during special session, there were two things that were done. The first one was to allocate $650 million to Hurricane Ian and Nicole. And then the second was to allocate another $50 million for what's known as revenue replacement. The allocation for the 650 has not been completely appropriated, but what they're trying to do in a budget is continue to allocate dollars and cents that we could appropriate towards the recovery of both Ian and Nicole. Every issue that I talked about was very well received, I can say. Revenue replacement is for any entity, including the CPD, that has the opportunity to apply for an interest-free loan. It's offered by the Department of Economic Opportunity. It is available. You can go online and apply for it. So I believe the panel is even in a separate entity, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm mistaken, David can correct me. But the intent really was to try to allow separate entities that might have had their revenue disrupted to apply for funds. They anticipate Sanibel to apply. They anticipate Fort Myers Beach to apply. And we're really trying to measure what the recovery is from revenue, what is ad valorem taxes that are being paid, different revenue streams that one anticipates, whether it's beach parking, whether it's tolls, whatever the issue is. We're trying to have some type of indication. Both Sanibel and Captiva had indicated that they're running around 40% of collections normally at this point of the year. Even with the extension the governor gave, by the end of January, we'd receive about 90% of collections. We generally budget for 95% with 5% of bad debt for reserves. So they're trending much slower. There is a process that allows taxpayers to pay without penalty through May. The discount continues to go down every month as a result of that. But the revenue streams that not only the county but cities receive are multiple revenue streams, I should say. The only issue that's really seemed to be going well is sales tax, as one could imagine, with all the additional stimuli that's put in the economy right now between boat loans and car loans and obviously insurance claims, SBA loans, your own personal money to restore and fix your properties. Sales taxes at all-time highs. We certainly floated an idea that maybe there be an allocation to try to offset some of these expenses and allocate to the direct county where the sales tax is actually being collected. It seems in theory, if you could think about it, we're actually going through and injecting an awful lot of money into the economy. And it's split through 67 counties. We just asked that it might be considered that all counties that were affected by storms seem to have a different allocation, not looking to find a way to pay for some of the projects. But when we're running into some very unorthodox things like revenue replacement or some things that may come up that may seem a little unusual. I generally don't go up there and ask for $70 million in bridges. But in the same token, the county has roughly about $100 million in unappropriated reserves. So $72 million in one aspect without any other issues. Along the Department of Transportation, just the signs and the street lights alone look like our tab will be about $7 million. So we can get to $100 million pretty quickly on just different appropriations as you go through. So we, the county commission, as a result of the long-term recovery task force, has basically elected me to be that person. And with that in mind, I'm going to be going up every other week and spending the majority of the week up there. Just continue to remind people the devastation that we've had here in Lee County, continue to remind people just the type of help we need. And more importantly, really the return on investment, as I've tried to frame it. I'm not looking for a handout, I'm looking for a hand up. And the return on investment allows us to have all our revenue streams continue to get back to where they were. And the state's the greatest beneficiary of those revenue streams. Obviously, as more businesses get open, more hotels get open, the economic impact of employment, payroll taxes, sales tax, it just goes on and on and on. So most people understand what we're going through. I was just told by the people from Bay County that went through Hurricane Michael some 4 years ago, if you'd like money and the dollars that we're looking at are in the billions, you need to be there pretty frequently. So not to obviously try to be there up there weekly, which is just impossible for me to do so. I've elected to go every other week. The county commission has been very supportive of that initiative, and it seems to be very effective. I received obviously a round of applause, which I didn't count on in the state Senate chambers. Ben Albritton, who's the incoming president after Kathleen Pasadomer, basically acknowledged just my tenacity and went through that process and thanked me for being here and thanked me for just constantly reminding everybody where we are. It's the job I asked for, so I understand what's at stake. And I've been up to Tallahassee now in my 16th year of doing this an awful lot. So I've built relationships pretty well on both sides. So I'm pretty confident of the appropriations. Really, there's nothing going on now as far as people to go up. Session hasn't officially started until March 7th. So the idea is that there's less traffic up there. So you have an opportunity to have more quality time as you visit with the legislators, both in the House and the Senate side. So that's kind of the strategy we've gone with. We have excellent lobbyists, Cademus and Partners. They've gotten us every conceivable appointment that you'd want. We met the new Department of Economic Opportunity Secretary. She replaced Dane Eagle. Dane Eagle, we have hired. He now is working for Ballard and Partners, a federal lobbyist firm. We're planning our first trip in March to go to Washington, and then another one in April. Obviously, we have significant asks of Washington as well when it comes to appropriations, when it comes to dollars and cents that we need. But we're pretty steadfast. The task force itself is going to meet February 27th, and that'll be the elected officials. That'll be the kickoff of this. It's taken a little bit longer. Staff, as well as our outside company called Haggerty, has had their hands full with just the volume of claims that we've had to file. We've processed over $273 million just in government claims that we've needed to keep the operations going. So Haggerty has a responsibility to help us with the auditing aspect of it. Anytime you receive federal or state grant money or a loan, you have to account for it. They have the opportunity to review bills. Most times they'll advance 50% of the money, and then the other 50% is when the reconciliation takes place. So it's a interesting process you go through. You start to understand exactly what just the enormity of this claim is. Walking into the next item, we've started to have cutoff dates for when debris will be picked up. Debris in the right of way, and that's different than debris on personal property. So to remind everyone on this call, debris in the right of way is a responsibility that we have through Crowder Gulf. They will pick up the debris that's there, and the cutoff date for Captiva was February 13th. Debris that is not in the right of way, that's from personal residence, that's on personal property, will continue to be picked up. That is a state mission. That continues to obviously be a state mission. They'll continue to pick that up. So if there's any particular construction debris on personal property that you're aware of that they haven't picked up, please just notify my office, the address, the location, and we'll work with Doug Whitehead, who's in charge of our solid waste. That's how we're coordinating this. If I'll go back. Yeah,
Kevin, yeah, excuse me. So
ahead.
you're saying that, the trucks going up and down the street, clearing all the vegetation debris that's in the right of way, that has ended as of, I guess, today.
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. But you can still push your construction debris up to the right of way.
Well, push it onto your property. Don't put it in the right of way.
Not in the right of way, but at the
Yeah.
front edge of your property.
Correct. And you have to sign a release for us to pick it up, but we'll pick it up.
Okay, and then the process to do that is to call your office? Is that what?
Oh, no, if there's anyone that, so right now, what you do is fill out a form. It's a waiver form. That's the most important thing.
Uh-huh.
The waiver form allows me to go on your personal property, Jay, and pick up the debris. So
Okay.
my office is just facilitating one to get the waiver form that's necessary to sign. I just am not aware of debris unless people bring it to my attention.
Right.
I can't direct the resources. What I've found in my entire district since it's been the most devastated, people just give me addresses or just mailing in addresses, emailing to us. And we've just been accumulate them, give them to Doug Whitehead, and he's facilitating them all. What we're trying to do is help people with the actual form, because again, due to personal property, I have to have you, the homeowner, sign a waiver that allows us to go on your property.
Okay.
So that's important. Back in December, the federal government stopped paying for 100% of this. So it's 75% that's paid for what's known as items A and B under debris. The B is actually more of the debris and construction items, but they paid 100% through December 7th. Thereafter, they paid 75%. The legislators during special session appropriated the 25%, which should have been split between the county and the state. The state picked up the entire 25%, so the county didn't have any responsibilities. So all of this debris, as we've cleaned it up and picked it up, so far has been paid for by state and federal agencies, which is really important. It allows us to concentrate on having more money spent on our recovery as opposed to debris. And not the debris pickup isn't important, but I'd hate to have us have less money to start with on the recovery aspects of this. On Captiva alone, we're just under 200,000 cubic yards of material that we picked up. That was the most recent report I received this morning. That's not a final report, but that's what we've received. So I'm just trying to make sure that if there's anyone that has come down late, if anyone that has decided they want to renovate their property or remediate their property, and now they feel like it needs to be something greater than that, there is still an opportunity to pick up that construction debris.
Okay.
We'll continue to do that. I just think that's important. Everybody's gone through enough financial hardships. Whatever we can do to assist you, we want to assist you. Pamela's been great in just making sure that we get the waiver forms, make sure you get them signed and kind of follow up on it. Again, it's paperwork, but it's necessary paperwork because nobody will walk on anyone's property without that paperwork.
Right.
You know,
Kevin,
so-
can I get just clarity for the audience?
Sure.
So for example, when they are now, you have landscapers now that are clearing properties, and they have big piles of vegetation right at the road's edge that could only be picked up by something like the claw, right, from Crowded Gulf. But is Crowded Gulf still going to, at your request, at your office's request, still come out with the claw and pick it up and put it in those?
Yes,
Yes?
yes.
Oh, okay.
We've made a commitment as a county that we will continue to pick up debris. What we're asking people to do is have some more sense of urgency. We want to start to get to the next stage. As I continue to deploy resources and manage this, you can't even imagine the accounting that's required to go through this process. We're just trying to encourage people to get that done as quickly as possible. I'm more concerned, and not that the vegetation is important, David, I'm more concerned about construction debris.
Right.
If you decided to gut your house to a certain degree, and then all of a sudden a contractor comes along and says, you know what, you need to remediate it more. That's the type of debris that's going to be really costly to pick up. And it's going to be, voluminous in nature. That's what I'm most concerned about. Any other debris from a vegetation point of view, if it's truly from the storm, yes, call us. If it's truly from just obviously a major trimming you might have done or something of that nature, just make sure if you're calling us, it's from the storm or emailing us. But we've been receiving those emails in bunches. It's kind of how we're coordinating everything.
Okay.
We have more flexibility, obviously, as you can imagine, with Sandoval and Captiva, because it took 3 weeks longer to get, when the bridge being open. So we've cut off many areas, like in the Gateway area, the airport in January. So we just need to obviously tell them they're trying to have some urgency to try to get to the next phase. I think there's a lot of anxiety to get to the next phase of recovery, and debris prevents us from getting there.
Gotcha.
So that's that issue. I was able to put in, I met with David and Jay Brown in my office about different grants. I was able to submit them all to Adam Botana. Every grant that we've asked for has been submitted. The Senate has no deadline. The weird thing about this is the House had a deadline and the Senate doesn't. So you could walk through the front door of the Senate if you forget something, and the House will write a companion bill. I don't know why one branch obviously has a timeline and the other doesn't. As we all have listened to Representative Botana, who's done a great job, he's just reminded us of the opportunities. The other opportunity I want to make sure everyone understood, on top of the Department of Economic Opportunity loan, that has no limit to it. So whatever you believe you need, there's another loan that's available through the Department of Emergency Management. That is up to $5 million. That loan is strongly encouraged that any entity that exists apply for it. 90% of the times FEMA forgives those loans. So that's one that's available. So there's two different loans that are available, one through the Department of Emergency Management, one through the Department of Economic Opportunity. The difference between the two is there's a great likelihood that the first one through the Department of Emergency Management would be forgiven by FEMA. It's offered through that. The Department of Economic Opportunity was initially funded with $50 million. The legislator said, let's see what we need. If that $50 million is exhausted, they'll go back and backfill that with another $50 million. They'll do it in that type of increments. So pretty receptive to making sure we continue to offer services to the residents through Lee County, whether you're a city, whether you're unincorporated like Captiva. We want to make sure that we continue to do that, and our revenue streams aren't impacted to obviously now start to cut people or get rid of, lay people off, so on and so forth. That's not the intent of this at all. The county seems to be trending a little bit better than most. We're in the 80 percentile as collections are. The math sometimes at times just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because if Sanibel remits taxes to the county, Fort Myers Beach remits taxes to the county, and they're only at 40%. Somehow I'm not as confident that the 80% we've collected, because Sanibel's property values, as well as Fort Myers Beach property values, are pretty high. So I'm having a hard time struggling with, are we at 80%? But we're gonna get some backup. We're just trying to make sure. I have encouraged staff to apply for both loans regardless. You can apply for a loan and not necessarily have to take the loan. I just want to make sure we continue to offer services to the residents of Lee County, and we're able to get through this, what I call, obviously slump, which we'll recover from. I'm not really that worried about it. We're still a very fast growing situation. Trailers are finally, FEMA trailers are finally rolling out as we speak. There've been different locations that have been approved. It's taken quite some time to try to get them approved. A variety of different issues, from flood zone to just the way they operate. So that obviously is something that's new. You'll start to see trailers appear. There's thousands that obviously been ordered. They're trying to expedite this. But to get a trailer, you have to have power, you have to have water, you have to have it obviously approved by FEMA, which is a slow process. So we're trying to work through that issue as best we can. I'll pause for a moment. I'm sure there's some questions, and I'll gladly happy to take any questions, but I know I've talked for a long time.
Well, Kevin, I guess I don't have a question. I have a comment. I can't believe everything that you're doing, for our community, for Lee County, and, the support you're giving us on Captiva. I just think it's unbelievable, and I'm so appreciative of, how you've taken charge of everything here, and, have stepped up to represent the county, and, help us get, everything that we can possibly get to aid in our recovery. So I'm just deeply appreciative of everything you're doing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Actually, I have a question.
Sure.
And what about the infrastructure of the roads here on Captiva? I have noticed that a lot of embankment areas have lost a lot of sand or fill, and the tar on the edges is crumbling away. Is this something that Lee County is asking help for also?
So two aspects, yes, great question. The first aspect is we've asked for $75 million in beach erosion and obviously renourishment from sand. The second issue that you're referring to in infrastructure is part of the task force responsibility. What we're trying to do is quantify, and there's an actual part of the branches. So there's 10 branches within the task force. One is called infrastructure, where we identify and we give accumulated lists of what we need and what the dollar amounts are. So when we did beach renourishment, we came up that actually Lee County needs $75 million. We'll do the same with roads as we go through and believe they're impacted. Both on the House and the Senate side, there's a chair in charge of resiliency, which is really hurricane recovery. So they deal with every issue you have. So far, we've done natural resources, septic, we've done beach renourishment, we've done bridges. As the items come together, that's why we strongly believe there's a need for a task force. As we go through the county, we identify the various areas that are needed, and the legislature continues to understand that. The other aspect that we're not naive to is that Washington is going to have to play a significant role in this too. Many of the infrastructure projects, there's currently already shovel-ready projects that are already approved. So we'll be able to move very quickly. We did meet with Ballard Partners. Dane Eagle is heading that up. And obviously we have our first trip in March. So the task force we envision, because the task force will be a group of elected people, but then each side of each branch has a chair and people of that. So they're going to meet weekly. And we're going to start to identify what both the state and the federal government has asked us to do. Instead of having 13 different entities within Lee County, they're asking us to accumulate the dollars and cents and ask on behalf of Lee County as a region, not Lee County unincorporated and the cities. So yes, infrastructure is on the top of the list. We just don't have a dollar amount. That takes a little bit more work. We work with the Department of Transportation to help us in that regard. Lee County not only has a Department of Transportation, but we work directly with the state on that. And our representative has been down here many times.
Thank you. And actually, I do have another question. It regards the backflow meters or backflow. Some of them, because the debris was placed too close to them, were picked up by FEMA. It has caused broken water lines, and it has caused huge water bills. And on top of that, those backflow valves needed replacement. But is that something where FEMA can reimburse us?
Yes. So
Yeah.
underneath all waterways, we talked about transmission lines, pipes that are broken, backflows, you name it. We had breaches throughout Lee County. We've even worked with FEMA in getting letters from LCEC that would be helpful in indicating when power was off. If you had a generator, you're able to obviously put that claim in through FEMA, through your insurance company. We're starting to identify these things. But as you can imagine, the number of issues that are coming up really goes back to why there's a need for a task force. As we accumulate these issues, we want to make sure we ask them in total as opposed to being fragmented. Because once the legislature starts March 7th, the opportunities to interact with them are going to be very much diminished. There's 413 cities, there's 67 counties. When session starts, the traffic that I could tell you that goes through the legislative branches, both in the House and the Senate, becomes unbearable. If you get 3 minutes, it's been a lot. So we're trying to do everything we can to be up there again and again before March 7th. It's crucial that we do so.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Hey,
Other
Kevin,
questions? Yeah, John Jensen.
Kevin, what is the best email address if people want to try and get that form from your office?
So it's district abbreviated DIST 1 at leagov.com.
Thank you.
And my phone number is 533-2224. Just call my office and talk to Pamela. She'll certainly facilitate whatever you need.
What was the phone number again, Kevin? Sorry.
533-2224.
Okay.
And if you forget either one of those, you could just type in Board of County Commissioners, Lee County. It's broken down by district. You can click on my office. It'll give you both of that information.
All right. Thank
Okay?
you.
Not a problem.
I have a question.
Sure.
On utilities, I wondered what your view is about the resilience of our utilities, like water, power, Do you think that we performed adequately, or do you see that we need to get better?
We need to get better. We've talked a lot. I testified in the resiliency, both on the House and the Senate side. We need to harden, and that's where the rub becomes as we start to harden water, whether it's transmission lines, whether it's septic, which brings the conversation of why not do it as sewer. We need to do a much better job. The second issue with electricity becomes a little bit more complicated because it's an outside party. We acknowledge the help that LCEC needed through the storm. FP&L did much better in that regard. FP&L just has the resources necessary, from equipment to personnel. My district, as it starts in Upper Captiva all the way through to Boca Grande, is all LCEC. And I can tell you that LCEC does not have the manpower necessary to deal with a storm of this magnitude. And without the help of Duke and FP&L, I don't know where we'd be today. So we are both in issues. So the issues, when I first testified back in December, people asked, how did we do with electric? There's a lot of room for improvements. I think we really have to think about underground wiring. And how did we do with water? Well, since every single aspect of water on every part of Lee County breached, we had water issues to the point where evacuating hospitals because of lack of water. We need to obviously do a much better job than we did, and we will. They're bringing a lot of different people to make sure we do that. Sid Kitson just was up in Tallahassee testifying before the Resiliency Committee, talks about the things they do in Babcock Ranch. If you didn't look at the special on 60 Minutes, they sustained 0 damage. So the resiliency aspects that he identified in committee, as well as there's a resiliency officer. So Wes Brooks is his name. He works for the governor. We have an appointment in 2 weeks to sit down and go over his thoughts on resiliency and a lot of the major arteries that we have, from water to electric, to make sure we are in much better shape than we are today.
How are you thinking about, thank you very much. How are you thinking about telecom?
Haven't really gone that far. That becomes even more complicated because of the need for cell towers. That's a really touchy subject. Lee County, a long time ago, including the city of Sanibel and many cities, have identified spots where cell towers are going to be. Boca Grande comes to my mind, the one that literally almost snapped in half. There's now a thought to try to relocate that. I can tell you that there took a lot of time and effort to try to find some consensus in putting cell towers up. We need to work a lot closer with the optics and fiber optics and every aspect of that, because quite frankly, that was an issue that we underperformed. Again, as you start to get into the private companies, the relationship isn't nearly as intimate as you'd like it to be. So we're trying to work on those processes, but we recognize, and trust me, as someone that was at ground zero, not having the ability to use either one of my cell phones was not necessarily the most desirable situation I was in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody else have questions for Kevin? Kevin, we greatly appreciate all the time that you have given us this morning. So much appreciated. I don't know if you can continue to attend our meetings on an ongoing basis, but and if you can't, we would certainly understand that, as we know you're so busy, but to the extent you can continue to open our meetings, well, we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I thank you. The public input is really important. The whole reason for the task force to try to understand the issues. And I recognize that about 70% of the entire damage to the storm was in my district. So, hearing from the citizens, I can't imagine what anyone's going through, but unless we get input, we just need to try to put it into different areas, whether it's infrastructure, housing, natural resources, and understand the issues as we come across. We just had someone post on Nextdoor that they actually submitted the propane bill to their insurance company, got reimbursed for it. I wouldn't even dream of that. Because electric, they got a letter from LCEC that said that. So it's important. What you enable me to do is get a group of people, you put minutes out there, and I have the citizens become much more engaged. The other way, it's just a very laborious process of people trying to get to my office. So if we could you have central questions, we streamline the process. It just makes our life a lot easier.
Okay, good.
In a tough situation. And the good news is within my district, very much groups like yourselves get together. Tonight I'll be in Pine Island. We do this in person for about an hour and go through, the issues that they have, and then they excuse me and they get into other issues that they deal with. But again, Cape Coral does it, and any areas that are in unincorporated. We do it in Boca Grande. They were there Thursday, even though I wasn't there. It's really important as you come across things. Don't hesitate for a moment. Send Pam an email. There's no such thing as a stupid question at all. Until we ask, we don't know the answer.
Right. Okay, well, unless anybody has anything else for Kevin, thank you so much for all your time.
My pleasure. Everybody have a great week. I appreciate it. Talk to you all soon.
Okay, thank
Be
you.
well.
again.
Thank you,
Bye. Okay, well, that was quite a briefing from Kevin. I don't know that I followed everything he said on all the appropriation requests that are going on. David, do you think you understand it, or?
Yeah, I think I understand it. I mean, what he basically said is that he has an overview of all the requests that are being made in the county. They're being made directly to the Florida legislature. They're being processed through Adam Botana's office. Are also funds available through FEMA directly through the Department of Emergency Management. That's the $5 million loan, which may not have to be repaid. And then there's separate money, EEO loan, which maybe the panel can apply for funds, but I'm not sure we need a loan. CEPD should definitely apply for the $5 million loan, which maybe won't have to be repaid or likely not to be repaid. He made a point of that. He also, I feel like a commentator after, really think of it. But the other thing is that the legislative request that went into Tallahassee includes all the funding for CEPD for beach renourishment, beach walkovers, their vehicle, and that's being handled by a lobbyist with CEPD, but Commissioner Ruane is overseeing that. He's making sure that gets done. And he also said today that he submitted our request for $200,000 for our
village stormwater.
Our stormwater management design study, which will be for the Captiva Village, which is very important. And he said he submitted all our requests. I don't know if that really includes, we put in $100,000 for just fixing up the shoulder on Captiva Drive, and another $400,000 for the sidewalk in the village that was going to be done the same time as the sewers. So I don't know whether that's included, but I'm fairly confident based on what he said is that the $200,000 for the stormwater management study was submitted. Whether
Right.
funded remains to be seen. So having said all of that, I think we're doing as well as we can expect at this point.
Right, okay.
And I heard one other thing which Daniel and I texted about, is that there is a revenue recovery fund. And we have lost revenues because our parking lot is closed.
Right.
So Daniel's going to follow up on that, which can help us on our meter budget this year. So I've
When she
also
said-
heard from that.
When she said we, Linda's talking about CEPD there, not the panel.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first we'd heard of the revenue recovery fund.
Right.
Okay, moving on with our agenda. Next up is our update from Mike Sawicki from the Sheriff's Office. Mike, are you around?
I sure am,
Good. Thank you for being here.
of course. Well, I'll keep it brief for you guys because I know there's a lot on the agenda. I just wanted to get a reminder out there that as more of the parks and businesses and public areas are opening up, it's we're preparing ourselves for an increase in traffic. Along with that, even with the limited parking that we have, we're already starting to see people get pretty creative about where they can park and getting pretty creative about whose property they think they're allowed to walk through to access the beach and what have you. And I mean, obviously we understand the public desire to get out to the beach and use it, but we have responded to several trespassing complaints and even on a proactive basis found, vehicles and cars parked on other people's properties. And, we're just running into, again, I mean, not a group of master criminals or anything like that, or people that are really trying to hurt anything. But there are a lot of members of the public that feel like they're entitled to use other people's properties just to access the beach. So
do we call your office if somebody is passing, or how do we handle that?
Yeah, I mean, if you especially if you see something of concern, but my main point with that is some of the way that we're finding these is people are observing this activity on their cameras and calling us, and that's fine too. If you have an issue with trespassing or with, even you see something suspicious on a neighbor's property, it kind of goes back to the idea that even while most of these people are out here not causing problems, if they're on properties where there's items of value, it might become a crime of opportunity where somebody just sees something that they want on the back of somebody's house or on the property or something. And, they're tossing it in there. I mean, we've certainly seen quite a number of people out here scrapping and trash picking and things like that already. And we just don't want that to project onto that next level where they're wandering into properties and, removing properties that the homeowner or removing items that the homeowner intends to keep. So we're just trying to be defensive of the properties and probably the best way for people to help with that is if you have a camera system, make sure it's operational and, call us if you see people creeping around the houses.
Right.
Yeah. Mike, I don't know if you were able to hear Commissioner Rain's presentation, but there will be, and you can sort of coordinate and think about this, there will be some issues with the debris that's put out at the edge of the street after this date, where Crowder Gulf is no longer automatically picking it up. And what Commissioner Ruane said is that to get it picked up, you got to contact his office and they will pick it up. But as sure as I'm sitting here, I'm sure there will be landscapers or contractors who will be putting things out at the edge of the street, but will not be contacting or signing waiver forms with Commissioner Ruane's office. And so that debris will then probably just stay there because nobody will be contacting Commissioner Ruane's office, and that debris will be continuing to be put out. So I don't know how that enforcement mechanism is going to take place, but maybe you can sort of think that through a little bit. I'm sure, like Sanibel has the February 20th cutoff date, and I'm confident that February 20th, they will enforce whatever they're doing. But I just don't know how that's going to take place on Captiva, or how we're going to make sure that people are submitting waiver forms to get this stuff picked up. So I just ask that you think about that a little bit.
Sure.
We go forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first thing we want to do is to help educate people to understand that that's coming to an end and what they need to do about it. This morning is the first I'd heard about it being cut off yesterday. And I hope I'm not the only person that's in that same boat. So I think we'll start by just making sure that if we see debris out there, we help to let homeowners know that the appropriate process for removing it from this point forward. Similarly, if you have contractors or landscapers working on your properties, make sure that they understand that as well, that the time for just putting it out there has come to a close without some special arrangement.
Right, because in the past, landscapers, when they had debris, they would take it off the island themselves, right?
Yes.
Now they've got into the, legitimate habit of saying we just put it out up the street. And
Well,
unless,
semi-legitimate habit. Some of them not at all. Some of them it's bordering on a real problem for them.
you're right, so anyway, I just ask that you think about that a little bit and figure out a way to work with us and with the county to make this happen in a smooth way.
Yes, and I would imagine anything that's maintained on the property that isn't being picked up or isn't being collected, if it becomes problematic and won't be picked up through the proper channels, it would be a code enforcement issue. All right.
Yeah, I think we ought to put out an email blast on this, maybe.
I think so.
Informing the public of what to do,
And I think people put out, there's a lot on the streets right now, but it's on private property because people thought that's where they're supposed to put it rather than in the right of way. And so there's a
Yes.
lot there that hasn't been picked up. And what Ruane just said, because it was on private property, it wasn't. So we have huge piles right now.
Right, and yes, and if they're in front of people's property, they should sign the waiver forms and notify Pamela Smith of his office to pick that up.
Right. So we now have a process, right?
Right, so I think Jay is correct. We already notified, at least our constituency, that there was a February 13th cutoff date. Ken, you should make sure that Sheriff Sawicki, Lieutenant Sawicki is on our email list, so he sees it. But anyway, but I think we should notify people who to contact to get the property, the debris picked up from this point forward. And we can do a special email blast for that. Right about that.
Okay, anybody have anything else for Mike? Okay, very good. Thanks, Mike.
Certainly welcome.
Yeah, moving on. Update from the fire district. Jeff Powell, are you around?
I am. Good morning, everybody. How are you today?
Hey, Jeff.
I'll just touch on a couple things that Kevin and Mike kind of addressed. The easiest one is debris. Obviously that, continues to pose a threat for us as far as public safety goes, because the longer that sits there, the drier it gets. And now we're moving into brush fire season. So it only takes, one lightning strike, one power line to go down, or one contractor to hit some metal underground and cause a spark. So there's been a lot of those throughout the county. So if you are one of those property owners who contractors maybe didn't get it out in time or whatever it is, it is, from what I understand, as far as contacting the county, that is 100% on the actual property owner themselves as far as that waiver, and not on the contractors. So just make sure everybody's aware of that. Second, Kevin mentioned the funding and the couple loans and whatnot that are out there. I can tell you, as a fire district, as of January 31st, we have only received right around 65% of our tax revenue in collections. So when Kevin spoke of those 60% and 80%, those numbers, traditionally in January, we're easily in the 90% out here. Homeowners on Captiva usually pay their taxes early and whatnot. But with the hurricane this year, obviously that number is lagging behind. So we are also exploring those alternative funding measures to carry us through. So Kevin did mention that the community disaster loan is the big one that he was talking about. So just to make it clear, the cap on the loan is $5 million. I know he said that everybody likes to tout that these loans are traditionally forgiven. I'll tell you, the meeting I just sat through with FEMA, that was not the implication that they let us know about. After the 5 year is up, when the term expires, if your district is still in dire straits and they do an analysis and determine you can't pay it back, that's when those loans can be forgiven. It's not just, hey, you took a loan up to $5 million and FEMA's most likely going to forgive it. That wasn't the way it was presented. What's that?
That was not the message you got.
That was not the message. The message was, this is a loan from the government that you're going to repay in 5 years. And they're glad to give them, and we're going through the process. They said it's a 3 to 5 month analysis process on your last 3 fiscal years, a current one, a disaster, and then going forward. So it's a lengthy process. They said it's traditionally about a 25% of the fiscal year's operating budget is usually the number that they fall on. That seems to make sense to carry governments through to perform essential operations. So just wanted to clarify some of that. I know when the county does things, they're a little bit different or maybe presented differently, but how that affects any of you guys, probably not a whole bunch other than myself and the CEPD as organizations that'll probably try and utilize some of that funding going forward. With that, we are also working on our FEMA reimbursement. Also another lengthy, time-consuming process with FEMA to try and get reimbursed for our extra costs related to recovery, which is mainly staffing and equipment usage during the storm, during that immediate period of emergency measures. So we're going through that. We've moved on to our third program manager. So it's kind of like you start the process, you get about halfway through, and they assign you somebody new, and you start all over. So they are lengthy processes, but we are moving through that, as well as part of that. Hopefully the roof on the fire station did not survive as well as we thought it did during the hurricane. So we've got that project that we need to get replaced here. So that was a pretty pricey number when that quote came in. So a little unexpected, but working through that. Lastly, two points. The guys will be out painting hydrants here in the next month or two as more of this debris gets cleaned up. We got to get them repainted. There's a lot of salt and rust building up on those just from the saltwater inundation. So when you see the guys on the side of the road, just kind of be careful as you're going past them, because they'll be out there painting those hydrants up and down Captiva Drive.
Yeah, I noticed that yesterday that you all were doing that.
Yeah, we've been trying to clean them and maintain them and exercise them as soon as we had the time after storm to get all that salt water and that corrosion off of them. But with the amount of debris piles, it was just pretty difficult to continually get them completed. So as more of that gets picked up, we're going to be continuing that process. And then the board, Jeff Brown was appointed to the Fire Commission board to fill that vacant seat that we had, as he's now a resident on the island again. They just appointed him back to the board, so we're back to a full commission again.
You have 3 commissioners, is that right, on the board?
We do. Yep. Cheryl Sims, Carol Campbell, and Jeff Brown are the 3 commissioners.
Okay.
Yep. He took that seat that was vacated by John Bates, needed to be filled.
Right. Okay.
Jeff.
Go ahead. Yep.
Two questions for you. One, could you just clarify so that we all understand this? When there's no question that after the hurricane, the fire department did yeoman's work in clearing the streets of debris. I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody's extremely thankful for that. The first question I have for you, is that something that you guys did because you just thought it was the right thing to do? Or is that how you see part of your official duties after a hurricane as part of the fire district? I'm just curious for future, whether or not we, as we develop resiliency options, whether we can count on that as part of your official duties, or whether that's something you guys just went out of your way to do it in an emergency.
So kind of twofold. It is part of our, as we consider it, part of our duty to at least get that road opened up to the extent we can get emergency vehicles through. So traditionally, that's one lane of traffic that we at least strive for. Traditionally, it's our guys with chainsaws and hand crews and stuff like that. We did have the luxury this year of some added equipment, dozers and front end loaders and whatnot that were on the island that we were able to utilize that we haven't or don't always have access to. We don't own our own heavy equipment, but we had access to some of that this year. So we were able to, once we finished the search and rescue emergency measures, then we were able to, with some of that added equipment, go back and then make it even greater than what it was.
So Jeff,
I say-
your first job following a hurricane it's search and rescue, right?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yep.
And
Yep.
then when that's completed, then your next job is to get all the roadways cleared so that traffic.
Yeah, yep, yeah.
That's
So,
good.
search and rescues first. Secondary is property damage, survey damage for the county, which is basically what they used to call a windshield assessment. You know, we're not doing a full engineering study on properties, but we're going through each one.
You go through each one, right?
Go through each one secondary. Once we know everybody is off the island and safe, we go back and do those. And then lastly, then it's those safety measures, making sure all of our hydrants are clear, making sure we at least have access for our trucks to get through on an emergency basis. That's kind of as it progresses down the line. Once one lane's open, if we have the time, you know, it obviously is dependent on the storm and the damage, but if we have the time, then yeah, we'll go back out and we'll help clean up more and make that one lane down to 2 lanes or whatever we can. Because we know it's going to take a while before we're going to get added assistance out here to clear roads. DOT is not going to be out here the day after the storm helping clear roads and move stuff out of the way. Public Works from Sanibel is doing their own island. They're not coming up here to help clear roads.
Right.
Forestry on the island's not coming up here very expeditiously clear roads. So is it officially in our charter description of measures? No. But do we feel it's a safety measure and we're going to go out and we're going to get it done? Yes, to whatever we can do, of course.
Right.
So we have to make sure in a resiliency plan that you have the resources to do that. That's really what it comes down to, as opposed to, I mean, you have the manpower, you need the resources, make sure that gets done. We don't have to, and as part of a resiliency plan, figure out how to get manpower other than the fire district, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so related to that question, we had the helicopter pads on South Seas, which obviously also be able to get to. That's on private property, the resort. Is that something that is also you saw as your responsibility is to clear the pathways to the helicopter pad, even though it's on South Seas?
Yeah, we don't consider South Seas any different than the rest of the island.
Okay.
They're within our district. They pay property taxes just like everybody else does. So
Okay.
to us, South Seas isn't any different than Tween Waters or Leica, Whiteman, Captiva Drive.
Great.
There's still areas that we have to protect and provide public safety to. So we treat it all just the same.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah,
how
go
long,
ahead.
how long with Ian did it take before, the main road in Captiva was, accessible? Or
We had, I'd have to go back and look at my notes to be 100%, but we had the main road open at least one lane within a couple days.
right,
Yeah. And then, obviously then expanded it from there into side roads and made it wider and stuff like that. But sorry, I've got a lot of things in my brain right now, Jay, but from the best of my recollection, without looking at our forms and stuff, I believe it was within a couple days, we had the whole main road open from one end to the other.
right.
Mike Sawicki might be able to remember even better than I can, but he was out here as well. But I think that's the best I recollect.
Right. Well, a project that the panel's, starting to work on is we want to do an analysis of, how the hurricane, hit us, what was the flood level.
Mhm.
And we want to, try to do a history of what the response, was. What are the key things that, happened when.
Mhm.
It's just kind of a post-mortem on the hurricane with the idea of identifying ways that we can improve, in the future. So, I think Linda Laird or, somebody will, in the next few weeks, probably just want to have a meeting with you and,
Yeah, absolutely.
try to understand.
I spoke to Linda. She stopped by a couple
Okay.
weeks ago and had an initial conversation. But
Right,
yeah,
that's what I'm referring to. right.
And we'll talk some more, Jeff.
I'm sure we will. Absolutely. You know where to find me. And if not, you guys all got my contact. So just reach out and we'll do whatever we can to help you guys out for sure.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, I have a question for you. Do you have an update from the fire chief from Giuseppe that was hurt in the helicopter accident?
So the last update that we received as a county is he's been moved to Atlanta now, to a rehab facility there. The last update that I had was he is still paralyzed from the shoulders down.
Wow. I was not aware of that.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice guy, really nice man.
He was. Rob's a real good guy.
Mhm.
He was initially transferred over to Miami, had some surgeries. He was on a ventilator for a while, and then was able to get him transferred up. I guess the Atlanta area has got a good facility for that type of thing. But the last update that I had, which was right around Christmas, was he was basically paralyzed from the shoulders down, didn't have any feeling.
Wow.
So yeah, it was an unfortunate event, that's for sure.
Okay, does anybody else have questions for Jeff? Well, Jeff, thanks so much for the update. Much appreciated.
Of
Thank
course,
you so
Jay.
much.
Yep, and I know this may not be the appropriate time or venue or whatnot, but just quickly, I know the efforts, the panel and the CCA and all of you as residents and businesses on the island. I hear what you guys are doing for myself and family, and I'm just truly blessed and honored to have your guys' support. So thank you.
Well, I think we're finding out, we'll be talking about this later on in the meeting, but I think the message is that the community has enormous respect for you and what you do with, for our community. And I think this community is going to really rally to help you out with all the difficulties, personal difficulties that you were facing. And in spite of all those difficulties, it was community first, and you led this response to the hurricane in spite of your own difficulties. And I think the community recognizes that and is going to really want to support you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Here.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, next up, Bob Walter, South Seas update.
Actually, I don't have anything to report that hasn't already been discussed. Kevin covered quite an amount of items. I'll answer any questions that anybody might have, though.
Okay, one I have for you, the South Seas appears to want to harden the FGA plant. Can you give us any update on that? Is that where South Seas is? They want to commit themselves to reliance on the FGA plant long term, and they're trying to get funding to harden that plant for the long term. Am I correct on that, Bob?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, well, that was my question for you. Who else has got questions for?
No, nothing.
Bob, do you have any idea when South Seas will be discussing what the long-term development plans are for the resort?
Well, hopefully soon. I mean, internally, we're still reviewing our master plans, and
Right.
the hurricane completely took us for
Oh yeah, of
for
course.
a turn, and we're trying to expedite as much process as we can. how we can and if we can. So we're still determining all those factors yet, but as soon as we get everything together, we realize we can proceed in the direction we'd like to go, that we're releasing immediately. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
we're frustrated too. It's just a painstaking process.
right.
I mean, one thing we didn't talk about, and I was on another call when we talked about this, but one thing, when Kevin was on, and I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat, but permitting right now, as we all talked about weeks ago, is just taking forever.
Mhm.
And we've had demo permits that have been in for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and it's amazing.
Really? Okay. Okay, anybody else have anything for Bob?
Part of, Bob, part of the resiliency plan that Kevin's working on is like one of the subcommittees that's going to focus on that very issue. So if you could give any like examples of you applied for this at a certain time and you still haven't heard back at a certain time, I'm meeting with Sid Kitson and we're kind of working on that committee together from Babcock. And that would be helpful if you just kind of give me just details, like we applied this and we just need to be able to work a little quicker, because I think we're all facing the same thing. So it would be helpful.
Right. I mean, we've completed a complete resiliency study and vulnerability study, basically for Captiva, of which we've given it to the CCP, the panel, as well as CEPD, for possible grant funding to move in those directions. We'd be more than happy to share it with that group as well. Just let me know, Sandy, and I'll send you a link to it.
Yeah, it would be probably helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, well, Bob, thanks for taking those questions. Much appreciated. Next agenda item is an update from SCCF. We've been informed by
CEPD's first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've skipped over that. Thanks, David. Yeah, next up is CEPD. Thanks for catching that. Daniel Munt, are you around?
Good morning. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Dan.
I just have a few items for you all this morning. We already kind of talked over, but our appropriations requests were submitted for dune walkovers, some funding for a new beach vehicle, $400,000 for the phase 2 study of Apton vulnerability analysis. And we submitted just over $6.8 million to help fund a new beach nourishment in the appropriation session. Our lobbyist seems to be pretty optimistic about those going through. So good news all around there. We do have.
So Daniel, you're saying it's going to take $6.8 million to undo the damage to the beach that was.
It will be more than that. But that's basically the other half of additional funding that we've received, where we came up with that $6.8+ million.
Jay, it's going to cost about 13 million, but there are different funding sources. And so it's appropriate to put 6 million here and the other 7 million someplace else.
Okay.
Where's the other someplace else?
Okay, Daniel, you go now.
We've got several different funding allocations. The other half was 48% submitted. I believe it came from FDE. Was the other 48%. We are currently under review with both FEMA as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. There's been a reinterpretation of sorts from FEMA's aspect, where because we're initially a federally authorized and constructed project through the Army Corps, they've taken the stance that currently, until the Army Corps says they will not help us, it's in the Army Corps' purview to help us. So we're in their review process. We anticipate word back from them within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Last I spoke to Tristan Brown. And we also have a funding request under review additionally through FDEP.
Daniel, are you anticipating a beach renourishment process similar to what we had when we did the beach renourishment just recently, where we're gonna have sand being pumped in from, out in the Gulf, and then the whole thing all basically in the same form as we did before? Is that what it's gonna look like?
I would anticipate that, yes.
Okay.
Likely from the same borough area. That's I mean, I can't speak for the engineers, but I would anticipate probably from the same borough area, probably same pipeline landings. I think it went fairly smooth this last time, so.
And with respect to funding, Daniel and the team are all over it and working it very diligently. I'm confident they're doing everything that can be done to get the funding. I'm pretty confident we're getting the funding for the beach renourishment. And we've got hurdles to jump over, and we get, pushed here, pushed there, but it's all part of the process. And Aptum, Daniel, Carrie's involved, are all working it hard with lobbyists, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Anything else for Daniel? Folks?
Yeah, I have a few more items, Jay.
Yeah, oh, sure, thanks.
We do have a upcoming workshop with Aptum to discuss the vulnerability analysis, but with a main focus on our legal memorandum of authority to implement any of these sea level rise projects that we would pursue. That's on February 23rd, which is Thursday at 1 p.m. Public is invited to attend. Our parking lot is continuing to be worked on. Lee County Parks and Recreation is currently clearing all the sand, and that retaining wall was actually blown out during the hurricane, so they're removing that. And I would anticipate that to be open possibly within the next month to month and a half. Still a big process. We have all the signage and garbage bins and all the little miscellaneous items that would have to be replaced on that parking lot to get it back where it was. And then the last item I have is we're required to perform beach tilling every year prior to the start of sea turtle nesting season. So we've gotten a proposal, and I would anticipate the beach tilling to be performed within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks. It'll be a day or two of tractors coming up and down the beach to aerate and prepare it for sea turtle nesting season. That's all I have, barring any questions.
Daniel,
Yes.
Yeah, John.
Daniel, how about Blind Pass area? How is that coming along? When do you think that parking would be open? What's going on down there right now?
The Turner Beach parking lot is under the control of the city of Sanibel. I'm not aware of any timeline. I do understand that one's in quite a bit of shambles as well when I drove past it. So I'm not sure on the timeline for that parking lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're working.
Hey, John, it's Tony. At the VCB meeting, Steve Patel was there, and they are going to put sand out in front of the big power pole there to stabilize that beach, because I had to sign a waiver in order for them to truck in that sand on that side. And while he was there, I asked him about the dredging of Blind Pass, and that is still on schedule. I don't know the exact schedule. Daniel, maybe you know when that's coming, but it is on schedule because it was already permitted and all set to go. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but that part, but the trucking is going to happen just to put so many yards out in front of that road to protect that abutment. That's just so you know. Okay.
Well, thanks, Tony.
At Captiva, Tony?
That is correct. Yeah, they'll be coming in. It's right where they built that
Yep.
buttress there, and they want to stabilize it. So that will be happening. And then they're going to put a little more sand there. But, they said that the Blind Pass got sort of cleaned out a little bit when the storm went back out again. So anyways, they're going to dredge it, I know.
That's interesting because I heard it was scoured out to 13 feet and it was in good shape. So who knows? It's the county's though. It's not ours to
Yeah.
fix.
Thanks, Tony.
Anything else for on CEPD? Okay, well, let's move on to an update from SCCF. This is a new agenda item, and as I understand it, SCCF on an ongoing basis would like to make reports at our panel meetings, which I think is a wonderful addition to our ongoing agenda item. So I'm not sure who is here from SCCF, but whoever is here, please come on.
Hi, Jay. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to reintegrate into these panels. I'm Matt DePaulis. I'm the Environmental Policy Director at SCCF. And I was told that this used to be kind of the relationship that SCCF had with the community panels. We would come on and do 5-minute updates in the meeting. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to be back in front of you.
Great. This is great. I really appreciate it. So
yeah, I'm glad to be here, and it's nice to meet all of you that I haven't met in person before or via Zoom before. So I'll just give a rundown of a couple things that we're thinking about at SCCF, and particularly in the policy department where I sit. Water quality has kind of been on the forefront of everyone's mind with the ongoing red tide that we're seeing. It is getting a little bit better, but we are noticing blooms offshore. They've gotten a little bit better in the past week. The fish kills aren't as bad as they were about a week ago, but we're still monitoring that, and the Marine Lab is involved in taking samples for red tide, and then also monitoring the Caloosahatchee and the estuary in front of it. We're still noticing elevated nutrient levels, which we've seen since the storm, basically, for a bunch of contributing factors. But we're hoping that those will eventually clear out. Another really interesting water quality issue that we're dealing with is increased salinity of the freshwater ponds that are on the islands. Those got fully inundated when the islands washed over in Ian, and a lot of them haven't cleared out yet. So that's causing some ecosystem issues for those species that normally colonize the freshwater ponds and don't have a habitat to go back to now. So we're just starting to understand what that is meaning for the habitat on the island, but we're monitoring that through the Marine Lab as well. Really big issue that we're seeing right now, and we're keeping an eye on, is the height of Lake Okeechobee. Prior to the storm, prior to Ian, it was low to the point that I was in front of the governing board pleading with them not to cut off the necessary releases to the Caloosahatchee in early September, which the agriculture was really pushing for those cutoffs to happen, which we need about 750 cubic feet per second in the dry season to come out of the lake to support our recover targets in the estuary, which are oysters and tape grass. And they were threatening to cut those off because the lake was so low. It was sitting at a little above 12 feet. Cut to a month and a half later, we've had Ian go through, Nicole's on its way, and that lake shot up over 4 feet. So we have now been receiving optimal flows since Ian, basically a couple weeks after Ian, which are right around 2000 CFS, a little over, a little under. But we've been maintaining those optimal flows. And optimal just means that we're getting enough water out of Lake Okeechobee that it's maintaining the salinity gradient for those oysters and tape grass, but aren't pushing the salinity, freshwater salinity gradient too far one direction. However, basically, we've been receiving those high end of optimal, pushing on damaging since the storm, and the lake has only now started to go down. It was sitting at 16 feet since September. And now today it's sitting at 15.93 feet, which means it's going down, but not at a rate that we would expect to see it with the discharges coming to the Caloosahatchee. The St. Lucie is receiving discharges right now. We just aren't able to send enough water south to the Everglades because we don't have the capacity to clean it to meet the phosphorus standard necessary. And ag isn't really taking any water on their land. So I've been talking with the governing board. They're trying to come up with solutions because we need to get the lake down before rainy season starts. if we go into rainy season with a lake that's up around 15 feet, we're going to end up with massive damaging discharges at some point, which just tanks our water quality. Some of the lake experts I've been talking with are saying that it's not time yet to necessarily worry. April, May is really going to be a determinative in how fast that lake goes down with the air temperature right now, and we're not seeing the evaporation off of the lake. So once the temperature starts to pick up a little bit in April, May, we may be able to see that lake level come down to a point where we can hold enough water during the rainy season to not move into those damaging discharges. But it's something we're keeping an eye on, and everyone's kind of on pins and needles waiting to see what happens.
Okay.
And then just one final update. We're about to start the legislative session. Commissioner Ruane mentioned that there's a lot of work going on, especially on his end before the session, and we're monitoring some of the bills that are going through committee right now. We're in an interesting spot because we did have the governor issue an executive order a couple weeks ago that set aside or called for $3.5 billion to be spent on Everglades restoration and water quality, which is amazing. And this is the kind of investment we like to see. And it's coming on the tail end of a lot of other investments in similar projects. And this is what we need to move a lot of these projects forward, like the EAA reservoir and the C43 reservoir, which will allow us to hold more water. So if we're in situations like this, we can move water around in the system and hopefully get some more cleaning mechanisms involved as well, so we can send that water south to the Everglades. However, at odds with the governor's mandate to clean up the water are a lot of the bills that we're seeing actually moving through committee. There are a lot of bills that are pushing for reduced permitting needs, expedited permits to be pushing through development, reclassifying what sprawl means, and assigning lawyer fees and attorney fees to parties that push back against comprehensive land use plans. It's been unofficially deemed the session of sprawl already by some parties involved. So we're keeping an eye on all those too. And we're sending letters to remind some of the committee members of the governor's directive to protect the environment and protect water quality. But if these bills progress, then we're going to be sending out action alerts and really relying on the groundswell of our members to remind our legislators that they need to protect our natural resources, which in turn protects our economy and our environment and our way of life out here on these barrier islands. But if you're interested in following any of those bills, we have a legislative tracker on our website where we'll be picking out some of the more interesting ones and highlighting their paths through committee and through through the House and Senate as they move. So that's a little overview. If any of you are more interested in any of this stuff, feel free to reach out and I can talk your ear off for as long as you have time about all this stuff.
I really appreciate the update. I think this is a good addition to our ongoing agenda. You know, the work SCCF does is, critical to our futures. And so I'm really glad that you all are going to give us an update at each of our meetings. That's great. So having said that, do we have any questions for Matt?
Yeah, I have one question. On the lake discharges that you spoke of this morning, if the lake doesn't come down and there's going to be the potential of discharges into the Caloosahatchee, which will affect our water quality in the Pine Island Sound, et cetera, is that will those discharges be pursuant to the new LOSM criteria or is there some still discretion that the parties will have in terms of how much they release and when they release? Or is this a done deal? In other words, once the lake is a certain height, they're going to release something pursuant to the formula that's been recently readjusted and agreed to.
Yeah, so LOSM hasn't gone into practice yet. That'll be released in July. We should get the final draft and the record of decision, and then hopefully it'll come into play soon after that. The main distinction that we're going to see between LOSUM and the current LORS 08 schedule is that the current schedule allows for damaging discharges to start much earlier. So you'll see a lot more discharges in the damaging range, but not in the massively damaging range. Whereas LOSUM saves up those discharges. It allows a lot more operational flexibility to come into the play between the Army Corps and the Water District, and it allows the lake to be held a little bit higher. So the way that we tried to restructure the discharges through LOSUM is that we'll see many more optimal days. And then when it gets to a point where the lake is too high, we're going to be receiving discharges. With LOSUM, they're going to be massive damaging discharges that will hopefully be under a much shorter time frame. Whereas under the current schedule, the lake, when the lake gets a little bit too high, we'll see a much longer time frame of slightly elevated damaging discharges. So the way we look at LOSUM is it's going to be like ripping a Band-Aid off and getting that water out, and then hopefully returning to the recover targets in a short enough time frame that it won't harm the oysters and tape grass in the estuary as much as something that's persisting for months at a time.
So you're basically saying after June, is that what you said, or July?
July.
So if we get through July, then you would be under a different formula than if it's before July.
Yeah, unless something either comes up that someone pushes back upon strongly, or brings a lawsuit to get an injunction to stop LOSUM from enacting, I would expect July to be the start of it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Matt?
Man, I got one. This is Tony. Man,
Tony.
on the properties where all these cabbage palms have died, I guess through salt water, where the salt water sat too long. Is there any plan, or the freshwater mangroves that may have been damaged by all that salt water? Maybe the fresh ones come back, but I don't see the cabbage palms coming back. If they're dead, they're dead. They go through fires, great, but they don't do so good with the salt water. Is there any plan to remove those, or what do you think is going to happen in the long run? Your own estimation.
Cabbage palms, that's a good question. I'm not sure if I haven't heard of any plans to actually get in there and remove them, apart from just the natural breakdown of some of those plants. I know mangrove replantings are happening on some of our properties, and I anticipate that spreading to and more lands that we have access to. But I'm not aware of any plans to go replant cabbage palms and get out the dead ones. But I'll ask our Native Garden Center and see if they've heard of anything.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, Matt, thanks very much.
Yeah,
Next
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt. Next item, additional updates, including debris removal timelines. David, I think we discussed that. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that, or?
No, just two quick things I would add, Jay, one in response to your request to me, but the first is, if people go onto their property on lipa.org and go down to the photo of their house, underneath the photo of the house, you can click and you can see an aerial view of your home the day after the hurricane. So if you look at, and you can look at the whole island and see what it looked like the day after the hurricane, or 2 days after the hurricane, from an aerial view. So with respect to insurance claims, roof claims, et cetera, you can see a photo of exactly the damage on your home. You could zoom into it to see it.
Very interesting.
That's on the lipa.org.
Yeah.
Okay, also on the lipa.org, and Jade had just asked me to review this again quickly. There, when you go into www.lipa.org, at the top of the page, it says property tax relief refund information. And you can click on that and it'll give you an explanation of how you can apply for a refund on your property tax for the year 2022. That is the period from the September 28th, where the hurricane hit, to the end of the year, December 31st. And if your house was uninhabitable, and again, the definition is loss of use and occupancy of a residential structure for the purpose for which it was constructed, resulting from damage to the residential structure which was caused by the hurricane. So the question that keeps arising, obviously, if you have structural damage, if your house was destroyed or uninhabitable, you're entitled to the tax refund. If your house was on the second floor, but you had no water and no electricity, and therefore your house was uninhabitable because you couldn't use the home, I would recommend that you apply for the tax rebate and see what they say. The property appraiser will make a decision. If you apply, you have until April 3rd to apply. You go on that www.lipa.org. You hit their information with respect to the property tax relief. You will see the Department of Revenue Form DR 5001. You print that out, you fill it out, and you send it in. You have a maximum period of 95 days to claim, which is about a third of the property tax related to your structure, not the land, just the structure. And then you can fill that out, and the property appraiser will make a determination as to whether you get a check in the mail, and they'll make that determination by June 1st, 2023. So that's where we are. And we talked about it last month, but again, it's on the website. So just go and look at it and fill it out.
Okay, good. Thank you for that, David.
That's it.
Okay, I suggest this would be a good time to take a 5-minute break. So that, so let's do that. Let's all be back in 5 minutes, and then we will continue working our way through the agenda. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, I think we've had our 5 minutes, so we resume the meeting. Ken, are you ready to go again?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody is back. All right. Next thing on the agenda is the fundraising effort for Jeff Powell. Just to refresh everybody, we had about 40 people who volunteered to be sponsors for the Jeff Powell fundraising effort. To date, we have received contributions from about half the sponsors, which is totaling about $40,000. So we've got about half the responders or the endorsers for the project have sent checks in, and we're currently at about $40,000, which I think is just, you know, a terrific start to this. Ken has just sent out the first email to all Captiva property owners, advising them of Jeff's, you know, situation and our effort to do fundraising for him. Ken, is that correct? Where are we on?
Actually, I sent the second one out this morning. I did not realize the CCA was going to send one out last night.
Oh, okay.
So they got a double hit. And
Okay,
we
well,
also have a number of checks that were not reported to you, Jay. I got them late last night.
Oh, okay.
So there'll be more to come in later this week.
Okay, well, I think this is off to just a, you know, a terrific start. You know, the last information I had was approximately $40,000 raised from about half of our sponsors. We are having a number of people contribute as much as, you know, $5,000 piece to this effort, which I think is remarkable. But I think the bigger point is whatever anybody can do is welcome. What I really want to show Jeff is not, just the amount of money we've raised for him, but the breadth of support for him that exists in the community, just the sheer number of people that recognize what he went through and what he did, for our community. So it's not just the amount of funds raised, but the number of people, who have made donations to Jeff, I think is equally important. So I think that's my report on where we are with the Jeff Powell fundraising effort. I'd be happy to field any questions that anybody might have about it.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, let's move on to Captiva Drive revegetation and bike lanes. I know it's Dave Jensen, but I know Dave Mintz has been working on this also. So whoever wants to speak on it.
It's John Jensen. Yeah, well, we are meeting with the representative from the DOT this Thursday to go over, people are going to be replanning after the hurricane. So what's going to be the best way to keep the bike path clean, safe? And I know we do have an ordinance that says no plantings within 2 feet of the pavement of the bike path.
But that's largely ignored, has been in the past.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of the landscapers know the ordinance, but it may be something we want to shoot out an email, let everybody know about this. And the DOT may have some thoughts on how to make a buffer 2 feet away from the pavement. So we're gonna see what their thoughts are, and yeah, like I say, we may want to shoot something out to the community to be aware of this ordinance we have.
Well, I guess, the options are what we want to do is you've got right now through Captiva, you've got 2 feet of pavement between the road stripe and the edge of the pavement. So people that are bicycling or walking, they have that 2 feet to utilize. But our basic problem is that people plant right up to the edge of the pavement, and their plantings overgrow that 2 feet, which forces people, into the main roadway rather than staying, on the shoulder area.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out, ideally there should be 4 feet between the striping on the edge of the roadway and the planting. The 2 feet of pavement that exists now, and then an additional 2 feet that you're not supposed to plant, within.
Right.
So theoretically, there should be 4 feet between plantings and the striping of the roadway. But
right.
What's happening now is everybody plants right up to the edge of the roadway, and their plantings, arc over, the bike path.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out a way to have that 4 feet,
Yeah.
maintained.
Well,
So
yeah, which is 2 feet off the edge of the bike path.
right, so it's 2 feet of the asphalt and then 2 feet off the edge of the bike path for a total of 4 feet between plantings and the stripe on the roadway.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So I guess one option would be to see if there's any way LDOT would, add another 2 feet to each side of the roadway. I have a hard time believing that could ever happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think that'll happen.
Right. So
And then
another
there's,
option would be to have crushed shell or gravel,
yeah,
filling that space, or sod, but that's what we're trying to accomplish, right? Is how do we figure out how to preserve that, which should be 4 feet between plantings and the stripe on the edge of the roadway.
right. And then a lot of areas on Captiva Drive, you have the bike path and then it slopes down. So you'd have to really build it up to even put a 2-foot buffer there. So you don't even have room to plant for plantings. But, like in the village, there's a lot of areas where everything grows, it'll grow maybe along Tweenwater stretch where it grows over the bike path. So we're gonna get DOT's thoughts on how to maintain that.
Right. Okay, well, does anybody, on the panel have any suggestions or other ways to look at this? How do we maintain, 4 feet of open space between the edge of the roadway and people's planning? Does anybody have any ideas or comments they want to make about it?
Hey, form the Roundup police, and you'd give them cans of Roundup and they can go spray it to keep it open. See?
Yeah, okay.
Roundup police, we need that.
Right.
I don't think that's going to work, Tony.
In the past, it has never really been reinforced that plants had to, stay at a certain height, like a ground cover plant. Is that a possibility?
Yes. Yeah, if we could somehow keep people from, when they replant, planting stuff that grows high and starts arching over, the roadway. That's certainly one thing we could stress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the county code is right now very specific. It has not been enforced, but David, you may want to make a comment about that because the code doesn't even allow sod to be placed in that area.
Well, it says that there should be a setback of at least 2 feet from the edge of the pavement, which shall be maintained at all times for all vegetation below the height of 8 feet. So basically, what we're going to be asked, we're not looking to build a new roadway. We're not looking to build a new bicycle path. What we're looking to do is just enforce the existing code that would effectively protect the shoulder. At this point, our shoulder has not been protected. So the county could just take a piece of equipment and do a hard cut 2 feet from the edge of the pavement right down Captiva Drive. I'm not sure that's the approach we should take, but could do that and just make sure that nothing is planted within 2 feet of the shoulder that would then impact and encroach upon the shoulder. But that's the purpose of the meeting on Thursday is we're pretty sure this has happened in other places. They have experience with this. So we want to see how they best suggest and recommend how to enforce an unencroachable shoulder without doing heavy destruction to the vegetation along the road. And we'll listen to what they have to say. They'll make a recommendation, they'll talk it over, and we'll bring it back to the panel after we have that meeting.
Well, that is an interesting idea, though. I guess, every 6 months, the county could come by and just, with something that cuts everything that's more than 3 inches tall.
Right.
2 feet from the roadway.
Right. I mean, so that's what we want to do is see what they've done in the past in other communities and how they deal with it. The thing that's interesting is as soon as we reached out to the county, they got right back to us and immediately said, we'll work with you on this. Let's just set up a meeting. And that's why we had the meeting set up at the 16th.
Okay. So then we will be reporting on that at the next panel meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, David, the panel ordinances. You sent out a packet of all the changes that Lee County has agreed to, and you want to review those with the panel and make sure that you think the changes are reasonable. As I understand it, you just want to review those changes for the panel and
Exactly. If people remember, we sent a comprehensive land development to the code, to the county on in April of 2020. That's almost 3 years ago. They reviewed our proposals, which developed from workshops we had with the community, with mailings that we sent out to the community. We vetted everything we were proposing or the community was proposing. We sent it to the county. The county looked at it and they said, we're going to divide it into two packages. One is the land development code, which is regulations of land use. And the other is regulation of conduct, which they said should be in ordinances rather than in the land development code. That has not been historically true all the time, but they want to move in that direction. And so what we did is we agreed to remove the ordinances or the regulations that affected conduct and put them in an ordinance form. And then we just pursued the land development code first. The land development code was approved. Our changes to the land development code were approved by the county on September 21st, 2021. So that we have a land development code which has been amended and is in place and is currently the law. So then we took the basically 4 parts of the land development code and structured them into ordinances, keeping the same language, but putting them into ordinances. And they were for fertilizer, golf carts, noise, and parking. And we had 2 others, which the county would not entertain. But one was regulation on plastic straws. To this day, I can't understand why that's an issue for the county, but it was a very strong issue and they do not want to regulate the use of straws. And the other was septic regulation, which the county believes was a good proposal, but it should be done countywide. And that's now under review to see whether it can be done countywide. And it would need the assistance of the Department of Health, which is a state department. And then we have a septic to sewer conversion project in place or in line. So that's a much more complicated one. So what we're dealing with are 4 proposed ordinances: fertilizer,
Excuse me.
noise,
So what you're
and
saying is we were proposing, we had regulations for septic systems that we wanted to put in place.
We wanted inspections of septic systems so that they would be pumped every 3 to 5 years. And they would be regulated and inspected so that we would make sure they're functioning properly. It would not be polluting. But the county doesn't have jurisdiction over septic systems. It's the State Department of Health, which has a jurisdiction over septic systems. So they would need the cooperation of the Department of Health. They also recognize that we have about 400 or 398 septic systems on Captiva that potentially pollute. The rest of the county have thousands and thousands. And therefore, what Commissioner Ruane thought is that maybe we can use our model of a septic regulation system, which was based on a state proposal, and then try to incorporate that throughout the county. And that's still under discussion, hopefully sometime in the future. Maybe it'll be part of the task force. But what concerns us today is that we have 4 approved ordinance proposals, which includes fertilizer, golf carts, noise, and parking. And what we did is we took our original proposals, transformed them into ordinance proposals, sent them to the county. The county reviewed them with us, because Commissioner Ruane basically insisted that the county do that because he recognized the needs of Captiva are sometimes different than a county. And then on August 30th, 2022, we met with the code people in the county and with the county attorney's office with Commissioner Ruane and went over our 4 proposals, which were again, fertilizer, golf carts, noise, and parking. The county attorney reviewed it. They passed along their recommendations, what they could live with, what they couldn't live with. They sent it back to us. We then, Ken Goodham and myself, we then reviewed their recommendations. We accepted those which we thought were reasonable and didn't change the substance significantly of what we were proposing. And then we went back to them and said, no, we couldn't accept these things. We worked out compromises and we came up with the 4 ordinances that the county attorney and the county staff can agree to, and that I reviewed carefully. And I think that it's what we can live with. I think the compromises are fair. And that's what I'm presenting to the panel today. So basically what I sent to the panel are 4 ordinances. I hope you have them, which show our proposals in red and their changes in blue. And the blue and the red together is what's going to be proposed to the Board of County Commissioners for final approval after it goes through a committee business committee that reviews these ordinances, which should not be a problem. So I will just walk quickly through what they are. The first one is fertilizer. The county has accepted virtually our whole proposal on fertilizer with no change. Okay, there's one change. They changed section 2660 to the word "this section." That was it. So our fertilizer proposal now is consistent with the fertilizer rules of Sanibel. So our landscapers can just apply the more strict regulations on the use of fertilizer, the incorporation of nitrogen and phosphorus, et cetera. It's consistent now with Sanibel. It's easier for the landscapers to do because they work both on Sanibel and Captiva. We reviewed this with the landscapers before we proposed it, and they were fine with it. So what I'm saying is that the fertilizer ordinance proposal is basically identical to what we proposed. Okay?
Good.
Okay. The second one, we created a committee that looked at our golf cart ordinance. And it was a committee that consisted of our 2 golf cart companies and various other members of the community. And they reviewed the golf cart ordinance and made certain recommendations. We turned those recommendations into a proposed ordinance. And virtually the proposal that the committee came up with that was vetted with the community is almost identical to what the county has accepted. The only changes, I mean, I can just go through it right now under our golf cart. We have our own Captiva golf cart ordinance, applies only to Captiva. If you remember, they were on the signs that were near South Seas when you drove out of there in a golf cart. But so the changes that the golf cart committee proposed was that all golf carts that are leased or rented for use on Captiva or that are provided by rental properties on Captiva for use by renters, they now have to have a visible company or property identification and number on both sides of the golf cart. Jimmy's Golf Cart Company and YOLO always had that, but there were now golf carts showing up on Captiva that had no identifying marks. So if a 4-year-old was driving it or they were driving it with open alcohol containers, there was no need for anybody to identify them. Now, what this ordinance does is any commercial golf carts that are being rented on Captiva have to have identification so that somebody could tell the sheriff there was golf cart rented by X company with number 432 or whatever. Or if he finds something left out, they'll know whose that is. They also have to have a permanent sticker on the dashboard on the windshield advising their clients that you can't have unlicensed drivers, or you can't drive on the beach or on road shoulders or outside the permitted golf cart zones. That was recommended by the golf cart companies, and that's now in the ordinance. And the other thing in the ordinance is companies that lease or rent golf carts for use on Captiva must provide written notice to their customers at the time of the rental of the rules for Captiva in terms of driving golf carts. So that's in the ordinance. The only thing the county changed in our proposed ordinance was where we had underage drivers are prohibited. They changed that to unlicensed drivers are prohibited. And where we had the companies must instruct their customers about what the rules are, they changed it, must provide written notice to their customers. So those are the changes that the county wanted. Obviously, they're not significant. The other thing we had in here is no persons on a golf cart shall have any open alcoholic beverages in their possession. We put that in the in our ordinance because that was a problem that the sheriff deputies faced here. But it turns out that that's illegal in another part of it's illegal under state law, and it's also illegal under the open containers law in another ordinance on the county. So the county didn't feel there was a need to have this again in our ordinance. So they removed that. And then there was one other thing they removed in terms of what the companies had to instruct their purchasers about or their renters about when they're renting a golf cart is that they can't have open alcoholic beverages. The county didn't want them to instruct that because, again, that was in another ordinance, and it was also a state law and not a county ordinance. It turns out, we spoke to the sheriff, it turns out that it's illegal under state law and it's illegal under county law. So I'm just going to go back to the county attorney and just ask them whether they could leave that in when the companies instruct people about golf carts. But one way or the other, it's illegal. And whether it appears in our particular ordinance is something that we'll just decide. They'll have a final say on that. But basically, the golf cart proposed ordinance is identical to what our committee proposed. So that's number 2. Number 3 was the noise ordinance. And I'm going from the, and our noise ordinance, there is a noise ordinance for the county as a whole. And we didn't have any Captiva specific part of that. And the noise ordinance for the county as a whole basically required the sheriff to have a decibel meter with him and be able to listen to the level of the noise at a certain hour with the decibel reading. It became extremely difficult to enforce. So the committee that worked on this back in 2021 came up with a proposal, and that proposal was reviewed very carefully by the county for lots of reasons, and they made some changes in it. But I think that it is basically, in substance, what our community was looking for. And I don't know if people have it in front of them, but we will put this all on the website once we go through this. But what we're now saying with our add-in ordinance, the addition to the noise ordinance only applying to Captiva will say the following. So we now have a provision that says outdoor amplified music and noise disturbance on Captiva. And it says, it shall be unlawful on Captiva for any person or persons to operate any outdoor amplified equipment or play amplified music, which is cast upon the outdoors between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And that's something that this is the best kept secret on Captiva. Everybody knows there's no outdoor music after 10 o'clock, except there was no rule about that. That was just something the businesses and the community always agreed to. And now we're going to have it. We're just memorializing what everybody thought the rule actually was. And then there was a question of what's a noise disturbance. And we had a whole, we had language describing what a noise disturbance is, which is prohibited between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. The county didn't want to redefine what a noise disturbance is on Captiva. They wanted to use the county language as to what a noise disturbance is, so that throughout the county, what's a noise disturbance would be consistent. And so we agreed, okay, rather than write our own language about what a noise disturbance is, we'll just accept the county language. And the county language is a noise disturbance is one or a group of excessive, loud, harsh, raucous, non-harmonious sounds or vibrations that unreasonably disturb, alarm, injure, harm, or endanger the health or welfare of a reasonable person with normal sensitivities. So that's a noise disturbance, which is prohibited in the county, but it's now prohibited on Captiva between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. The difference is the county has a very complex decibel reading process to determine if there's a noise disturbance. Under our code, it will now say that you can't create a noise disturbance as defined by the county noise disturbance language, which I just read to you, between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. that is, quote, plainly heard from a receiving land, your next property, at a distance of 50 feet from the noise source. So rather than having to have a decibel, if the sheriff comes and listens to it and he can clearly hear it 50 feet from the noise source, and it's after 10 p.m., he can ask you, basically tell them to stop it. And what we added, what the county wanted added, was enforcement involving a noise disturbance requires a determination as to whether or not a noise disturbance exists by the sheriff's office personnel on the scene. So you can't just, issue a complaint or file a complaint or scream at the neighbor, et cetera. You call the sheriff and the sheriff determines that it violates the ordinance, then he or she has to be there. And then we also added, and it was already there, the county didn't object, the section does not apply to duly permitted events conducted at resort properties zoned for such activities, which is really South Seas and Twin Waters or Sandy's, so long as the noise is contained within the boundaries of the resort-owned property. So that's basically the noise ordinance. The only difference, major difference that the county wanted from us is they wanted, rather than we have our own definition of a noise disturbance, which was pretty comprehensive, they want us to use the county language, which we said, okay. And then they wanted to make sure that there was a sheriff deputy that heard it rather than anyone other than the sheriff reporting it. So those two things were changed, but other than that, it's the same thing as we proposed. The last thing was parking on Captiva Island. And on Captiva, it is illegal to park on any street or any right of way within the boundaries of Captiva Island. There is no parking on all of the streets of Captiva. That's under the existing ordinance. It's already there. We've changed that, and there are a couple of exceptions to that no parking rule, which was, fire department, emergency vehicles, police vehicles. What we added is a CEPD vehicle conducting the business of the Captiva Erosion Protection District. That's added as an exception. We also, and the reason this all came about is that on Sundays, the Chapel by the Sea has services, and on Easter and on Christmas. And they have traditionally had the numbers of people coming were such that they were parking on the streets on Chapin, Merman, Gore, and Wiles Drive. And they were parking there from, say, 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on Sundays. And that historically has been true for, my understanding is, for decades. Someone complained to the sheriff deputies that how come they can park there when there's no parking on all of Captiva? And for many years, the sheriff deputies just turned a blind eye to that. At a certain point, it became impossible to do that. And the sheriffs felt that they need to enforce the code, which is no parking, or they need to change the code. So in conjunction with the Chapel on the Sea and with the Sheriff's Department, we came up with a very comprehensive ordinance which allowed for parking between 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. and on Christmas Eve between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. only on Sundays, and there would be signage, and it would be the Chapel on the Sea, and therefore the sheriff deputies wouldn't be basically ignoring the code. We sent that to the county, and the county was very concerned that there would be a violation of the First Amendment and violation of the state constitution if they made a special exception to our no parking rule just for the Chapel by the Sea, and that it implicated all kinds of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, et cetera. It implicated all kinds of issues if we put that in the ordinance. So we tossed this around a lot, and we came up with this compromise. And the compromise is this. that eliminate everything having to do with chapel by the sea in the ordinance. And what we have here, we added a new exception to what I listed as the exceptions before: fire vehicles, utility vehicles, CEPD vehicle, emergency vehicles, etc. And now there's a new exception to the no parking rule. And that new exception reads as follows: areas designated on Wiles Drive and Chapin, Gore, and Merman Lanes where special postings by the Department of Transportation may allow limited parking for limited times. And then it'll have a map. And so what, rather than say it's because it's the chapel by the sea that's allowing for these additional parking exceptions, what we, and I met with the sheriff about this, what we're going to do and what the county agrees to is they will basically take the times and dates and places that we had very specifically laid out. That's going to be eliminated, but the Department of Transportation will work with the sheriff and the fire department to place signs there which are identical to what we wanted, but the signs will just show the limited parking for that period of time that we wanted for the chapel, but it won't be specifically in our ordinance related to the chapel. And I think that where that was of some concern to me is because before we sent this proposed ordinance to the county, we sent a letter to everybody on those streets, basically saying, are you all right with this? And we got back, everybody was all right with this. We had no objections. But now what we're doing is, rather than having that laid out directly in the ordinance, we're just saying that the Department of Transportation can allow limited parking for limited times on these streets, but the Department of Transportation is going to limit it to exactly what we want in the original ordinance, but it won't be there. I think that works for us. I think nobody should be concerned about that because we won't allow any signage there that isn't consistent with what we initially proposed. But that was the major change that the county, of all the ordinance that the county wanted, because they couldn't put in the ordinance that they were making a special exception for a church-related event. So that's where we are. So I wanted to review all this because I think it works. We now, so long as the panel agrees, I will let the county know that we're going to move forward with the negotiated final ordinances. It goes before the EROC committee, which is the Economic Regulation Organizing Committee, or I forget what it stands for, but it's business leaders in Lee County. They read it, they make some suggestions if they have any. They usually don't very much. They're just concerned about anything that might be a problem for businesses. We don't have that problem on Captiva here. And then it'll go to the Board of County Commissioners for final approval. And we will get this done, a process that we started, back in 2018, but we'll be done with this. All right, Jay.
Okay, David, do you need any kind of action from the panel to approve your changes, or?
Yeah, it would be great if we just had a motion from the panel saying that the changes negotiated between the panel and the county attorney and the county staff is acceptable to the panel. That would be great.
All right. I'll second the motion.
Does anybody want to make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Amendment passes. David, thanks for all the work on this. You've spent God knows how many hours.
Years, we're talking about years.
To get all this done. But, they're good changes to our code, and, thanks so much for, dogging this all these years and get this done for the community.
You're very welcome.
Okay, next up is wastewater committee update. I've got really nothing new to report. Progress on the sewer project depends upon Sanibel completing 2 consulting studies. The first is underway, and then the second one will begin. I suppose we're probably looking at something like 6 months before these studies are completed. The main thing we will get out of that is what kind of charges Sanibel wants to make to people to utilize the sewer system, which in turn then will allow us to know the complete cost of implementing the sewer program. And then the next step after that will be making an estimate of how much public funding that we will get for it, so that we will then know how much Captiva property owners will have to pay. And then once we know that, then we can proceed with the MSTBU process. So any questions on that?
Hey, Jay, John. Hey, so it sounds like South Seas for now is not going to be involved.
Yeah.
I know there was that option. So if this goes through in the studies, would they still build it to accommodate South Seas down the road, let's say 5, 10, 20 years from now?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I think that depends upon how confident we are about the long-term viability of the FGA, plant.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a significant increase in cost
Okay.
to be able to handle South Seas.
Okay. All right.
But there is a cost increase, but that's a great point. We're going to have to decide whether or not long-term we want to make provision, for South Seas to join this at some point in the future.
Yeah.
That's going to depend upon what their plans are for, the FGA plant, whether or not we all think that we can have confidence in the FGA plan after they do whatever they're going to do with it, that they would never have to, wind up using our system.
Because it may be the same size pipe, even if, or whatever, it may be the same
No,
project.
I think if I remember correctly, it is a bigger pipe, but the cost of the bigger pipe is not significant relative to the overall project cost.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Jay, I just want to say something about this. If South Seas came in, you're basically doubling the wastewater that goes to Donak's plant. It's about half the wastewater, so it goes from like 200 million to 400 million gallons per day or something like that. 400,000 gallons per day. But the number that's been bandied about is that 25 million to fortify the South Seas plant or the FGA plant. That's not what FGA applied for. FGA applied for $11 million from the state, of which they are going to match half of that. So they're really applying for, I think it's like 5.5 million or 6 million from the state, which is a much smaller number than been reported. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have a moving target. It's very complicated. We have no guarantee that we're going to have, even after we complete the studies, we're hopeful we'll have the sewage treatment plant. We're hopeful that people vote for it as an MSTBU, right? But there's no guarantee. Commissioner Ruane mentioned today that they're asking for $120 million in septic to sewer conversion for the county. We don't know how much of that can be applied to us or will be applied to us that would change it. So we got a lot of moving things, a lot of variables here. And if you're South Seas and you're investing and rebuilding South Seas, you got to make sure you have a sewage treatment plant. Otherwise, what's the point of putting any amount of money investing in South Seas? And there's no guarantee that we're going to have sewers on Captiva, even though we think there's a good possibility or even a probability. So they have to sort of take care of themselves and make sure that their piece is done. If it turns out before the hardening of the FGOA plan that we're moving forward on our sewer system for the rest of Captiva, it may be much easier for South Seas to say, listen, we want to be part of this project.
Right.
It's happening. Right now, there's no guarantee from their perspective that it's happening. There's so many variables. So they're sort of hedging their bets. And I think that there's no secret that Commissioner Ruane does not want to use the FGOA plan, that he thinks that's a mistake. But no guarantee that the project will get done on with Sanibel. So we got both things going on at the same time. And as this thing develops, it'll become much clearer where we're going and where South Seas is. But I understand why South Seas has to do what they're doing, even though it's not South Seas, it's FGOA that's doing it. But I understand that because they don't know how this thing's going to play out in the end.
Yep.
But so I think if we think about it that way, I think it's much easier to understand, and it allows us to move forward and not see anybody doing anything wrong, but just seeing that it's going to have to develop over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very, very complicated. You got, you know, variables at work here that each depend upon the other. It's very complicated.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay, next up, Stormwater Committee, Linda Laird.
Okay, so on the stormwater, we actually have proposals. We need to get the study done. And we've got proposals in two places, one for Deepwater Horizon money, and the other one is through the county, which Commissioner Ruane talked about. So there's some details we have to clean up on the proposal, but we've got it in two places and hopefully it's going to get funded. And the next part is that we've been concentrating pretty much on the village area. We need to start thinking again if we have recommendations for the non-village area. So we will be starting to work on that. From Ian, what we saw was that the water, when I talked to Jeff Powell, what I asked him is what was it like on the day after? And he said that the water in the village was sort of like when he walked in, they walked through 6 inches on binder. And it was sort of like after some big rain or flood event, like with like king tides or something like that. So it was flooding in the usual places. I think that actually is good news for us, that the water drains off quickly from our island at this point. So that's good. Finally, we're going to review the vulnerability assessments to make sure that we understand what it means for stormwater. We've got all these vulnerability assessments, but what does it really mean for our stormwater plan? And so that's what we're doing moving forward. By the time we get funded, or that we hear we're funded, it's probably next summer. So we're making little steps, but keeping the ball sort of rolling, or at least moving a little bit. Jay, next I wanted talking about the hurricane debriefing plan.
Yes, please do that. Well, were there any questions on the village stormwater plan before you do that? Okay, so basically we've got, Kimley Horn, has a proposal. It's roughly 200,000.
Yep.
Either get it funded by Kevin Ruane or the Deepwater Horizon grant. But high probability this thing's going to get funded, and we'll get Kimley Horn to develop a stormwater management plan for the village.
Yes.
And then the second point is the committee's got to move on and to say, all right, well, if we have a plan for the village, what about properties outside the village? We need to develop a set of recommendations for how people should manage or improve managing their stormwater on their properties outside the village.
Right. And so we'll work,
Their summary.
thank you very much. And we'll work with SCCF on that, I believe. Okay. On the hurricane, we've been talking, I've been thinking that what we need to do is basically debrief what we've learned on the hurricane. What the eventual goal is, where I want to go with all of this is a resilience plan for our island. And so what we need to do is understand what happened with Ian, and that becomes a critical foundation for our resilience plan. So the basic idea is to have some presentations about presentations and discussion next month with both the panel and the CEPD. Then after we do that and get that up and get that kind of information into it, present and discuss it with all Captivans, putting it on Zoom so everybody can attend and a way for everybody to be able to talk. And then after we get all this input or whatever, is pull it together in a final document for Captiva on the hurricane. In terms of the
So
initial,
it's an overview of what happened with the hurricane. What was our response? What were the weaknesses in our response?
yeah, what were the good parts and the bad parts? What have we learned from it? I mean, even simple things like, oh, metal roofs work. Oh, the building codes are pretty good things too, you know, things like that. It's sort of basic, but we've learned that we've learned those things.
And then when you have all that information pulled together, we review it with the panel, and then you want to hold a public meeting,
right,
via Zoom, to share that with the community and get input from the community or feedback from the community about what individuals experience that are different than
right
what we found in our analysis of the hurricane response.
Exactly. So, I mean, it starts off with characterizing this storm. This storm was, I mean, it's a category 4. What were the damages that we did see? Where were the damages? And then even the recovery highlights, like how soon did we get to the island? When did water come on? When did communications come on? What happened with septic fields? What happened with the debris removal? And then figure out the lessons we've learned from it. So it's working our way through that process with getting input from CEPD and from the panel, and then pull that together and then go talk to the Captivans so they can hear it all. We can hear it all and add our commentary to it. Sound okay to everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, I think the most important piece of this is to give everybody, all property owners on Captiva, an opportunity to tell us what they've thought the strengths and weaknesses were in the way we dealt with the hurricane, and what experiences they had that we didn't necessarily recognize right away, so that when we put together a resilience plan, we have all that information under our wings as we do that. And I think that's the key thing, is we want input from the 1,000 property owners, and we'll figure out a way in which they can have that input and we can let them speak to the panel. I think that's really what we're trying to do, right, Linda?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and I also think while it's fresh, we need to pull it all together so we remember too. I think that's important too, but we want to hear from the community, and the community can understand in one place the scope of the storm too. Okay, next, I want to talk about the vulnerability assessments a little bit with the panel. Aptim has done a vulnerability assessment and we're on round 2 of it. We're going to have a round 3 of it. There's still some mistakes in it, and it's still very difficult for most people to understand what it says and what it means. So the plan's going to be that either Cheryl Hapke or I or both of us are going to try to summarize the results of all of these into one document that summarizes the vulnerabilities and suggests an approach to solve them. The 3 vulnerability assessments are the one the panel paid for, the Brazaga one, and this one that CEPD is paying for. So hopefully this work gets done in the next month or so, I hope.
So
And-
Linda, what you're saying is you've got these 3 vulnerability analyses, which
Yes.
talk about what does the future of Captiva look like with sea level rise and increased storminess? How is that going to impact, you know, our
Exactly. And they don't all say exactly the same thing, and it's not clear what they're recommending. And you've got and they get really complicated on some of them.
Right. So what you're trying to do is you're going to try to reduce these 3 different vulnerability analysis, perhaps working with Cheryl, into a single document that the community can understand is what are the long-term vulnerabilities of Captiva and what are the issues that need to be addressed.
Exactly. I'm spending hours and hours and hours on the Aptum document. I mean, some of it is cleaning it up, and some of it is trying to figure out what in heaven's name is happening here. So I don't think anybody else is going to do that at this point. So I'm going to try to do this, and maybe with some help from Cheryl, and then we pull those 3 things, what we've heard from Aptum, what we've heard from Brazaga, and what we've heard from Cheryl, and say, okay, this is how I synthesize it into one big piece. We can make we will make those 3 available. So if anybody else wants to have this fun exercise, they can do it too. And say
volunteers, Linda.
I don't think so. And so, and then we can put it up there and say, this is what it says. And therefore, here's the priority areas. And therefore, this is the approach we need to take to go do it. Okay, that's what's happening on that.
Right, and then all this will lead up to, at some point, you're going to want to present the vulnerabilities Captiva faces to the community.
Yeah, we have to do the same thing again, then pull this together. Then I think we need to talk with the panel about it, talk with CEPD about it, see if everybody thinks that's right. And then we need to go talk to the community about it and get community input. And we'll try to do it in such a way people understand it. And then we're going to try to get community feedback.
Right.
And then after it's all said and done, we shoehorn it into the county task force recovery plan. And so that the Captiva resilience plan gets hopefully funded and becomes a priority for the county and its funding.
Yeah, you need to help me understand how we should fit this all together, David.
Yeah, but that's really how we want to go, because Captiva is a major source of income for the county and its recovery. So it's really important that Captiva recovers so that the county can also recover.
Yeah, and the way I see the recovery or resilience plan is we're going to have sets of different areas that we try to make them as independent as we can, because if we make them as independent as we can, it reduces the complexity of the whole thing. And we can have one group work on this and one group work on that. And somebody work on what do we need to do about the roads? And somebody needs to work on what are we doing about telecommunications, rather than trying to have this one big problem with lots of moving parts.
Right. But what we've learned from Commissioner Ruane is that the task force is basically a recovery plan, but in his mind, it's basically a resilience plan, because when you recover, you have to recover in a way that you're resilient for the next storm, next event. And so that basically recovery is resilience. And that's where we all fit into this. And that's why we have to sort of funnel into.
Well, in terms of, the faster you can recover, the more resilient you are. Yeah, that is true, John. Yep, interesting.
No, yeah.
And so, well, I mean, we're doing pretty well here. I just wanted to say this all to the panel members. I attended I think it's called the FSBC. I don't know what the name of it is. It's a big national conference on on the coast. And we had lots of presentations about the different hurricanes, people's approaches to it, the impact of them all. Nicole Sharp, who is the Aptum engineer in charge of our beaches, was one of the main organizers. We had Daniel Munt and Nicole give presentations. They had that happen. And Cheryl gave one. I was very, very proud of Captiva. I'm very, very proud. I think we've been doing a good job at taking care of our island. We have a long way to go, but I think other people were quite impressed with how well we were doing. And and I didn't have anything to do with the dunes, etc. at that point. So this is very much saying what the CEPD has done and what we have been doing in terms of vulnerability analysis. Okay. That was the end of that little commercial or whatever. Or thank you. Thank you to all those people who have saved our island.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, Linda, thanks for that. Thanks for that good report. Next up, where are we?
Iguana.
Is there anything new on iguanas? Isn't that resolved? Don't we have Alfredo out here now trapping and Lee County's paying for it? And
Yeah, Alfredo's out here once a week. He turned in an invoice for January and he got a check for it from the panel. So yeah, everything's on track. He did say a lot of the iguanas, he's getting a lot of iguanas, and a lot of them they're really skinny. So they're having a hard time finding food. But he did send out an invitation if anybody wants to ever ride around with him for an hour or two and see how he operates. They're more than welcome to just hop in his truck and see how he does his thing. So if anybody wants to do that, let me know.
okay.
And Dave, I do have a hard copy. Alfredo marked off where he's getting most of the iguanas, so I can give that to you on Thursday.
That would be great. Also, we submitted the invoice for $25,000 to the county, which will get sent to the panel, and then the panel will be able to continue to pay Alfredo.
All right, great.
Okay, next up, Ken's salary. At the last panel meeting, we raised Ken's compensation from, I think it was about 22,000 to 30,000. And we all agreed that Ann Brady should look at other compensation to leaders of other organizations and just make a determination of whether or not $30,000 is fair and reasonable compensation for Ken. And so, Ann, do you want to make a brief report on what you found?
Yes, happy to. So that was actually the December meeting that we raised.
I'm
his
sorry,
salary. Yeah, no, that's okay. And the committee, which was Bruce McDonald and me, we met in January to discuss strategy. And the first thing we needed to do was obtain a job description, which heretofore there had not been one. So that was a good step. Ken created one, and then we looked at it, revised it, edited it. So now we have a good job description. And although Ken's title is administrator, it's clear that the job covers a wide range of duties and that Ken's experience provides a level of service equal to that of a director position. Although, of course, he doesn't manage a staff or oversee facilities, and he's not fully responsible for meeting a budget. So, but that was important to keep in mind as I reviewed the 990s of 13 area nonprofits. And those, of course, are public documents, and all of the salaries listed were for full-time executive directors. The one that most closely aligned with Ken's position, the panel's position, was the CCA, the Captiva Civic Association. We thought in terms of budget size, salary, what we know of the responsibilities and duties. Clearly, there's not necessarily a very, a comp that's the same, but just it was probably the closest. And I do have a list of the 13 organizations if anyone's interested, but they were all in Sanibel and Fort Myers. So it was concluded that if the panel were to hire a full-time administrator, a salary of between 70 and 80 seemed reasonable and fair. There are no benefits attached to the job. The job would require significant experience, and particularly if the current duties now carried out by panel board members, you heard it today, all the things that the board members do, David, Jay, Linda, and so on, that in the future, some of those may be managed or anticipated would be expected to be managed by the panel administrator. So we would be looking, if Ken were to sometime in the few decades ahead retire, we would be looking for someone who has the experience to be able to do that. So those skill sets, that knowledge. And so the current 30,000 was deemed by the committee to be fair based on Ken's experience, his professionalism, his knowledge, and his willingness to do any job at any time on a moment's notice. So it should be noted that although the hours per week vary, the job does require an around-the-clock capacity to respond and to act. And Ken has really shown himself, to be very proactive. So we thought that the 30,000 that Ken was given was fair and just.
Given that this is a part-time job rather than
correct.
a full-time job.
Yes, it is. And the hours vary, weekly, monthly, and seasonally. But that so we, of course, the committee talked to Jay, and then Jay asked us to talk to Ken, and Ken also agreed. Ken did note that he did not ever see this as a full-time position necessarily, but that also it certainly could require more hours, again, based on what the panel members do or don't do.
Okay, so the net result is you think that the 30,000 we agreed to last time is fair and appropriate compensation, and Ken does agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that moving forward, we now have a good job description, which of course, can be revised, but and we have some comps based on if the position needed to be hired.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good work. Thanks so much, Ann.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Ann? Okay.
Excuse me, I do.
Yes. Yes, Linda.
I know we don't have a lot of money, but basically what Ann and her committee did is figure out that with the new raise, we are paying Ken on par with what he should be paid. During this time period, Ken was invaluable in terms of communicating with the community. And although this doesn't help with retention, and Ken will probably retire sooner or later anyway, I still think that the panel should give him a bonus for what he has done in Ian. His email blasts have been so wonderful for the community. They've been without value. I mean, they're invaluable to the community. And a part of it is his specific skill set in writing and his ability to communicate. But I think they have given the community a sense of community. I think they pulled us together and they kept everybody informed. I look forward to seeing what he has to say. So I think we should be giving him a bonus as well for being invaluable in this emergency time.
But you're proposing this as a one-time bonus, not an ongoing.
No, I'm saying, okay, 30,000, good. Okay, I believe we should give him a bonus to say thank you as well.
All right, are you thinking something like $5,000 maybe, or?
Perfect.
Okay,
And I don't know what anybody else thinks, but that's what I would propose.
I think, I find that to be a good suggestion. Do other members have comments?
No, I agree. I agree.
Well, I think we have the money to do it.
We have to ask Ken if we do. But so
I make a motion that, given Ken's contribution to the community in the post-hurricane crisis, and given his invaluable contribution to informing the community as to what was happening each step of the way, that the panel agreed to give him a one-time bonus of $5,000 in gratitude to his performance during the post-hurricane period.
Can I have a second to that motion?
Second. Linda, second.
Okay, any further discussion on that motion? All in favor of a $5,000 bonus for Ken, a one-time bonus to reflect the extraordinary work he's done during this hurricane response period, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Ken, cut yourself a check for 5,000.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. That was completely unexpected.
Yeah. Oh, I congratulate Linda for bringing that up. I think it's an excellent idea, and Linda, I'm glad you did that. Okay, other committee reports. I have one thing. I have followed up with Verizon and just had a recent discussion with Terry Burrows. They expect all their permitting work to be done and to get approval to implement the new small cell plan. He expects to have that all done by May. As to when construction of the 5 small cell towers would begin, he doesn't know that yet. It's going to depend upon all the other projects in the area that Verizon has to get done, but he expects to have all the permitting and permissions wrapped up by May. So that's where we are in Verizon. Anybody have any questions about that? Does anybody else have any other reports or anything that they would like to make?
I forgot to include anything about finances, which is included in the packet. I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions.
Yeah, I reviewed that. It just looks to me like we're in good shape, right now.
We've had a very, very generous response to our requests. We've already made our goal for this year.
From the mailings.
Yeah. So I was very impressed with that. The community is really stepping up.
Yeah. Well, I think that reflects a lot of what we did during the hurricane response, and also Ken, all the information that you've been providing to people is probably what's behind that.
Oh, I steal from good sources.
Yeah. Has there been any comment from the public that that we need to address, Ken?
There has been no comment from at all this time.
Okay.
You're doing great, apparently.
Okay. Well, does anybody else have anything else they want to bring up before we adjourn the meeting?
No.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, folks. See you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jay.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.